Internet conspiracy theories. The only known form of content to be scientifically proven to deal psychic damage to whoever watches it. With such compelling ideas as, what if rocks were really just trees for giants, and what if the pyramids went all the way down? It really is the modern day School of Athens. But some haters online have recently been pointing out that this content is, well, it's garbage. It's complete trash. And today, we get to the bottom of it. That's right, today we're going to be looking at the best and the worst of what the conspiracy community online has to offer. Because, you know, it's the holiday season. You know, you might be seeing some relatives that perhaps believe some pretty wild stuff. So we're going to be taking a look at that wild stuff and see how we can combat the festering wound of the internet that is misinformation and weirdly anti-Semitic rhetoric. Some call it view-farming nonsense, some call it the toxic sludge of the internet, but I call it my holiday gift to you, the viewer. I love the holiday season. So sit down, buckle up, and tell your family you love them, because we're currently hurtling straight towards a brick wall at about 90 miles an hour. So these conspiracy theories exist on a varying scale of truthfulness. Some are lighthearted fun that don't have any real-world consequences, and some are actually harmful by spreading things like medical misinformation or contributing to things like anti-Semitism. And if you examine that scale, you'll see a pattern emerge. One which demonstrates that as these theories become increasingly far-fetched, their potential to cause real-world harm seems to proportionally increase. This chart from Abby Richards on TikTok actually illustrates this pretty well. It's pretty much a perfect visualization of the positive correlation I mentioned between a conspiracy theory's detachment from reality and its likelihood to be involved in or inspire hateful ideology. You'll also notice that this top section up here is labeled the anti-Semitic point of no return. More on that in a moment, but to start out along this gradient, I think we should discuss the theories that are the most grounded in reality first. So this bottom portion of the chart here is exactly what it says. It's grounded in reality. This section represents conspiracy theories that really aren't even theories because they're things that actually have happened. Operation Mockingbird was a real propaganda program perpetrated by the CIA that sought to manipulate media during the Cold War. MKUltra was another real CIA program that involved human experimentation with the effects of psychedelic drugs. Big Tobacco really did know that their products caused cancer and tried to cover it up, etc., etc. So since all of these are real historical events, it kind of goes without saying that discussing them isn't harmful due to their historical nature. So with that being said, let's move on up the ladder. These next two sections on the chart mostly refer to things that are probably not true, but are also not contributing to any real world harm anyway. Like, is Bigfoot actually real? Probably not, but I can see how someone would kind of be into that in a pretty innocent way. Are Michael Jackson, Elvis, and Tupac all still alive and hiding out on some island somewhere? I mean, definitely not, but people grieve in different ways, and who am I to take that away from them? This is all to suggest that there are theories out there that are kind of just fun stories people made up, and sometimes even mechanisms to cope with grief. None of the conspiracies on these tiers actually contribute to a larger, more harmful narrative. And importantly, the people who believe them are mostly just casual believers who get into it because it's fun, unlike the people in the higher tiers of this chart who are just completely consumed by their hyperfixation on these topics. Which brings us to the next tier, reality denial. This tier and the one above it differ from the ones below in that they explicitly require the denial of evidence, reason, or even basic reality to be believed. They can range from anything from COVID and vaccine denial to the moon landing was faked to flat earth to QAnon. And all of these things have two things in common. They are completely based on easily disproven lies and faulty evidence, and require the narrative of some secret shadow entity controlling the world, keeping the truth from us. And that actually brings us to the last tier of this chart, which is the anti-Semitic point of no return. And it's called that because of this narrative that there is an evil shadow government that runs the world. Basically, anytime you hear a theory like this that centers on the secret cabal narrative, it's usually a reference to old anti-Semitic tropes and Nazi rhetoric. Narratives like this are essentially lifted straight from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a fabricated historical text disseminated by the Nazis that alludes to a Jewish plot for global domination. And so when people say the world is secretly run by the Illuminati or reptilians or Marxists or the deep state, that's really just always an allusion to the Jews. Now, do I think every single person who believes in these theories is just covertly talking about the Jews? No. But a lot of them are just covertly talking about the Jews. Now, you might have noticed that theories like Flat Earth and Hollow Earth appear on this level, and if that confuses you as to why those theories are anti-Semitic, ask yourself, or any believer in those theories, this question. Who is doing the lying? To properly answer that question, most conspiracy theorists have to point towards an internationally powerful organization pulling the strings, or it all just falls apart. Without the secret cabal running the world narrative, there's no way that any of these theories could be true. So that is what makes these theories anti-Semitic. It's the allusion to this globally influential, almost supernaturally powerful force that inflicts its will upon the world. So now that we've discussed the different levels of conspiracy theories, I want to examine them and determine what is it that makes conspiracies so popular? Why are we seeing now more than ever before so many people gravitating towards these outlandish and downright harmful fantasies? It can be a problem that's really tough to put your finger on, but I think we can break it down into 3 contributing factors. The ease of access to misinformation online, a lack of critical thinking and media literacy, and the emotional manipulation of the people who believe them. So we all know how good the internet has become at giving people information that they have an interest in receiving. I mean, with the advent of social media and content algorithms, it's easier than ever to be sucked right into a rabbit hole that you did not know existed an hour ago. Like 20 years ago, if you wanted some niche information on a topic, you had to go to the fucking library or the weird guy in your community who knew about it and ask him. Shit, even 10 years ago, you had to go to some obscure forum and find things out with nothing but elbow grease and determination. And now that content is just served right to you based on an algorithm's guess at what will get you to stay on the app the longest.
You are being lied to because no one has ever been in space.
The point is that fringe theories and information from less than reputable sources is not only easier than ever to find, but now it finds you. Not to mention your For You and Explore pages only serve you content that they can reasonably predict will increase your engagement. So in a way, this content is designed and delivered in ways that are meant to trap you. So of course we're seeing an uptick in popularity when it comes to conspiracy theories. They're more accessible than they ever have been. And to make it all worse, there's less of an incentive to fact check anything you see online nowadays. Because if you're just scrolling along on your phone, you're really just looking for that sweet, sweet dopamine hit. And when it hits, you scroll more to find another one.
Hold on, you've been scrolling for way too long.
So if you see something that's particularly inflammatory or, let's say, incongruent with reality, you're more likely to accept what it says at face value. I mean, honestly, who stops scrolling on TikTok just to say, well, let's see what Wikipedia has to say about this. And that kind of brings us to the next contributing factor of the popularity of these theories online. And that is a complete and utter lack of critical thinking skills and media literacy. I think a lot of people's initial instinct when discussing conspiracy theorists is to say that they're just dumb, or at the very least, ignorant of the facts. But that's not necessarily the case. It seems a little bit oversimplistic to me. Like if you ask a conspiracy theorist the same question about non-believers, they'd probably say the exact same thing, right? Like each group thinks that they're the ones with the facts and that the other group is gravely mistaken. In fact, some people who believe in these crazy conspiracy theories have read and studied so much horseshit that they think they're the most educated person in the room. We've all seen the guy who's clearly just buying into a conspiracy theory but has studies to back his points. But since he doesn't know how to critically analyze the methodology of a study or spot underlying bias within the research, he's more susceptible to believe studies that are just complete bunk. That's why it can be hard sometimes to tell the difference between someone who's highly educated and someone who's out of their mind. At the end of the day, that difference all comes down to an adherence to the scientific method and media literacy skills. Now, what do I mean by media literacy? Well, media literacy refers to the skill of being able to critically analyze specific messaging in media, which can range from anything from movies to podcasts to the news. And when I say specific messaging, that applies to explicit, implicit, and even downright covert messaging that many forms of media engage in. A good example of this is anytime Fox News talks about anything, basically. But to be more specific, take a look at this clip and see if you can spot the underlying message.
Border agents are saying this is the worst day they've ever seen. Biden broke another record for daily crossings, and our agents are outnumbered 200-1 at Eagle Pass. It's like the Alamo. Are we being conquered? We'll find out. The White House is now on the record saying opening the border is the only way to keep Texas safe. Is that how you stay safe at night? By keeping your doors wide open?
Now, the facts of what Jesse Watters is saying here are, to my knowledge, true. Eagle Pass is currently seeing a historically high rate of crossings. There is a lot of people stuck at our southern border right now, and they do far outnumber the number of Border Patrol agents there. But the problem isn't with the facts, it's how they're presented and the narrative that Jesse is using them to contribute to. Referring to the border crisis as the Alamo, asking if we're being conquered, and painting the image of a home invasion at night are all tactics that Jesse is using to paint innocent migrants at our southern border as invaders, likening them to some sort of military offensive or assailant criminal. There is the text of what he is saying and the subtext, which are separate and distinct from each other. And someone with very low media literacy can't efficiently discern between the two. And as they really only process the text of this news segment, the subtext that contains the anti-immigrant narrative discreetly slips past their censors and is accepted. This news segment, and Fox News in general, is not intended to be simply reporting facts, but pushing a thinly veiled and harmful narrative. That being that immigrants crossing the southern border are some sort of threat or attack on America. And since they can't openly say that, they have to report the news in a way that will sell this narrative without them having to actually say it. And this also gives them plausible deniability as well, because if anyone was to challenge what Jesse Watters is saying here, he has the benefit of saying, well, everything I said was factually true, so what I said can't be wrong. But it's not the facts that are wrong per se, it's the narrative. And so how does this apply to conspiracy theories? Well, imagine that same person with very low media literacy was engaging with someone who had a vested interest in bringing people over to their side. Someone like that, who's more at risk of accepting narratives with little to no scrutiny, is far more likely to fall into the question everything, do your own research, anti-establishment narrative. And don't get me wrong, questioning authority is good and very important, but the difference between a legitimate questioning of authority and this don't believe everything you see conspiracy narrative is that for many believers, this anti-establishment aesthetic is absolute and foundational to their worldview, meaning that no matter where the evidence may lead, it is always correct to assume that a voice of authority is lying or incorrect. For them, rejecting the word of authority figures is first principle and comes before any objective reason. And this mindset is really dangerous because it can, and often does, lead to people being taken advantage of. If you're of the mindset, never believe the establishment, then it's much easier for groups with nefarious interests to persuade you. All they have to do is tell you that the establishment is out to get them and is afraid of the truth. Sound familiar? It should, because that is basically the center of every single theory toward the top of this chart. They all rely on the pre-existing assumption that whatever official narratives are untrue, and they all offer answers to questions that arise from that assumption. In other words, they can exploit confirmation bias to instill whatever beliefs they want to onto a person. If a person is starting with the conclusion that the common consensus is wrong and working backwards from there, a bad faith actor only needs to fill in the gaps with misinfo and aesthetics that drive that conclusion home. Think, for example, COVID denial. There do exist interest groups in this country who more or less benefit from the spread of misinformation about the virus. Whether they're a corporation selling alternative medicine or a political group that benefits from using COVID as a wedge issue to garner support. Actually, COVID conspiracy theories are a really great demonstration of the third contributing factor to the rise of conspiratorial thinking online, which is how conspiracy theories have a way of taking advantage of the emotions of people who believe in them. Now, when I refer to emotional manipulation within the conspiracy community, I don't mean to imply that these people are easily manipulated or stupid. In fact, it's often quite the opposite, with many conspiracy theorists being perfectly rational, educated people. But it is also often the case that conspiracy theorists don't just have intellectual reasons for believing in something, but also a strong emotional investment in it being true. Actually, the evidence for belief in conspiracy theories being more of an emotional incentive rather than an intellectual one is quite substantial. Because if you think about it, if it was truly evidence and evidence alone that led them to their conclusions, then they wouldn't have those conclusions. So it must be something having more to do with emotional attachment. The most common way that this emotional attachment develops is due to the fact that conspiracy theories offer simple and concise answers to often big and existential questions. I mentioned a bit ago that COVID denial is a good example of this. COVID-19 was a very chaotic and even traumatic period of time for many. People had questions about everything happening around them, feeling unsure about the world and not being satisfied with the answers that mainstream sources were giving them. So it's no wonder that people turn to conspiracy theories in times of uncertainty and instability, because they give answers that quell those feelings, often being easily digestible, emotionally charged, and exploitative of pre-existing bias. And in especially emotional times, people want answers, and they want them fast. And sometimes science is at a disadvantage there, because it has to wait for research to be conducted and evidence to be found before a conclusion can be made. But a well-designed conspiracy theory, that doesn't have to wait for anything. It's instantaneous and therefore a lot more appealing to some people. So in the case of COVID, people wanted answers and weren't getting them. And they didn't just want answers. They wanted answers that offered them clarity and simplicity in a time that was unclear and complex, something only a fabrication could provide. Alternative theories about the vaccine or the death count or the efficacy of masks provided a scapegoat for a lot of suffering and uncertainty of the time. By exploiting people's health fears, many views of the far right were normalized in comparison to the perceived inadequacies of the political mainstream. And as things got worse and worse with the pandemic, people became more and more emotionally invested in whatever their conspiracy of choice was. I mean, we all know someone who started out the pandemic sanitizing their groceries and using hand sanitizer every 5 minutes to 2 years later being fully anti-mask, anti-vaccine, and let's say untrusting of health organizations like the WHO and the CDC. And by the way, the same goes for all conspiracy theories that require this distrust of authority. The stronger the emotional incentive is to believe in the conspiracy, the stronger the conviction becomes. And strong convictions that are also false and thoroughly debunked tend to only lead to one thing: superiority complexes. People are much more likely to hold on to a belief if they think they've uncovered some secret truth that is counter to mainstream narratives. With conspiracy theorists, the emotional incentive of feeling like only you and a select group of individuals know the truth about the world is very powerful, and is the reason they can be so immune to contrary evidence. The sense of enlightenment and community that conspiracies can provide is sometimes more powerful than the desire for the actual pursuit of truth. The more they feel they have to defend their positions to their friends and family, the more they feel that they're correct. It's a vicious cycle where, as these feelings of enlightenment and superiority grow, so too does their confidence in their intuition and faulty reasoning, which in turn makes them even more resistant to counter-evidence and scientific reasoning. So, if someone is so resistant to evidence, and we think they're pushing something harmful to them or society, how do we get them out? It seems like some people could be given comprehensive, well-researched and sourced, undeniable proof that their belief is incorrect and still continue believing. So is it even possible? I think it is possible. That does not mean it's easy. Abby Richards, who I mentioned earlier in this video, has an interview on her TikTok with a former QAnon believer. And when asked about how to pull people out, he said this:
Is there any way to get someone out of these beliefs? Because it doesn't seem like there's a way that you can force anyone to change their mind or make them like suddenly see reason.
You can't force anyone to change their mind. You can't control anyone's belief. All you can do is create an environment that is conducive for them to make that decision. Let them know if they want to get out, you're still there. But not for 1 second do you have to listen to their bullshit beliefs.
He's right. I think for the most part, you can't reason a person out of a position that they didn't use reason to arrive at. Like if a person's attachment to a conspiracy theory is an emotional one, emotion is probably what will have the greatest effect in pulling them out of it, no matter how much they've convinced themselves that their beliefs are based on facts and evidence. You also can't really argue someone out of a belief if that belief is tied to like the fate of the world or something, you know? You kind of just have to create an environment around that person that is supportive and conducive to growth. But like that interviewee says, that does not mean you have to listen to their bullshit. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It would really help me out. I am planning on having this video out before Christmas, so for anyone seeing this video in time, happy holidays. I think I'll be spending a lot of time with family and friends this upcoming week, so if there is no new video next weekend, that's why. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching, and bye.